That night was different. The kind of night you remember forever, not because of what was said, but because of what it revealed. I was lying in bed, pretending to scroll on my phone, when I heard her soft footsteps. My mother never came to my room at night. Not unless something was wrong. But this time, she walked in slowly, quietly, and sat right beside me without saying a word at first. Her silence felt heavier than anything she'd ever told me. I glanced at her, confused, wondering if maybe she was upset with me or just needed someone to talk to. But the way she looked at me, that quiet stare, filled with something between guilt and heartbreak, told me that whatever she was about to say, it would change everything. And it did. You see, in every family, there are stories kept locked away. Some are harmless, little secrets brushed under the rug. But others, they can shake the ground beneath your feet. My mother had one of those. A truth she had buried deep for years. A truth about our family. About trust. And most painfully, about betrayal. Growing up, I saw my parents as the picture of stability. Sure, they argued sometimes, but don't all couples? My father was strict but kind. My mother, always gentle, always there. I thought we were normal. But that night, sitting beside me, hands trembling slightly, my mother began to speak. And with every word she said, the image I had of our family started to blur. She didn't start with the full story. No, she started with a question. Do you remember that summer your father stayed late at work almost every night? I nodded. I remembered being a little girl, waiting by the window, thinking he just worked harder than most dads. But now, I could feel it, something in her voice was unraveling that memory, rewriting it with something far darker. She took a deep breath, like she was pulling the courage from someplace she hadn't visited in years. I didn't know how to tell you back then, she said, her voice cracking, but I can't carry it anymore. I felt my heart beating faster. My fingers curled slightly under the blanket. I didn't know what she was going to say, but I already knew it wasn't something I was ready for. It was the kind of conversation that splits life into two parts, before and after. She looked at me again, eyes filled with something that looked a lot like regret. And then, she started telling me about the woman. The messages. The nights he said he was working late. She started to tell me about the moment she found out the man she loved, the man I called Dad, was not the man she thought he was. But just as she was about to tell me everything, she paused. Her eyes dropped to the floor, and her lips tightened like she couldn't bring herself to say the next part. And that's when everything changed. She sat there, still, like the weight of the next sentence would break her. I didn't move either. I couldn't. It was like time froze around us. I stared at her hands, tightly clenched in her lap, while her eyes stayed fixed on the floor. Finally, in a voice barely louder than a whisper, she said, "There's more, but I don't know if you'll see me the same after I tell you." I didn't understand. Was she saying she knew about the infidelity all along? Or that she did something too? The room suddenly felt colder, the air thicker. I wanted to ask questions, but I knew I had to let her speak on her own time. So I waited. She leaned back slightly, her eyes finally meeting mine. "I found out a year before you did," she said slowly. "Before you even knew how late your father was staying out. I already knew where he was." Her words hit like slow drops of water, each one stirring up more confusion. "I found his phone one night, texts, pictures. And I didn't confront him. Not then." I blinked. That part didn't make sense to me. My mother, who always taught me to stand up for what's right, who told me honesty mattered more than anything, she stayed quiet. I kept hoping it would stop, she went on, her voice starting to crack again. I told myself maybe it was just a mistake, maybe if I pretended not to see it, it would end on its own. But it didn't. Her eyes were glassy now, holding back tears. And that's when I made a decision, one I never thought I would. My stomach dropped. My mind raced with thoughts I didn't want to believe. Did she leave him? Did she make some deal with him? Or was it something worse? She took another pause and reached into the drawer by my bed. I hadn't even noticed her bringing anything with her. She pulled out an old envelope, its edges worn, the seal already opened. She placed it on my lap. I was going to destroy this, she said, but something always stopped me. I looked down at the envelope, then back at her. What is it? I asked, my voice barely steady. She didn't answer. Not right away. She just whispered, proof. Of everything. And more than you're ready for. And just like that, I knew, whatever was inside that envelope had the power to completely rewrite everything I thought I knew about my parents, and maybe even about myself. My hands trembled as I held the envelope. It was lighter than I expected, but it felt like it carried 1,000 pounds of truth. My mother didn't say a word as I slowly pulled out the papers inside, 2 faded photographs, a printed email thread, and 1 handwritten note that looked like it had been torn from a journal. Each piece felt like a puzzle, but I didn't know the full picture yet. And somehow, I was afraid to find out. The photos weren't anything scandalous. Just my father sitting across from a woman at what looked like a cafe. But the body language was too familiar. He was leaning in, smiling, not in the way he smiled at us, but in the way someone smiles when they've let someone else into their heart. The woman was younger, maybe in her early 30s, dressed in business casual. I didn't recognize her, but something about her eyes felt strange, like she wasn't just some random stranger. I looked at my mother, confused. Who is she? Her lips pressed into a tight line. You've met her before, she said quietly. Once. At the hospital. I froze. A memory flickered in my mind. A few years back, when my father had a minor injury, a woman had come by while we were in the waiting area. She brought flowers. She said she was from his office. My mother had barely looked at her then. That was her? She nodded slowly. He said she was just a coworker. That she helped with projects. I believed him, until I didn't. The email thread painted an even clearer picture. It wasn't just emotional, it was full of plans. Weekend trips. Hotel bookings. Messages about how careful they had to be and how much longer they could keep this up. And then the handwritten note. That's what made my chest tighten. It wasn't written by my father. It was from her. The woman. It said, I know you said you'd never leave her, but how much longer can we keep living 2 lives? I looked back at my mom, her eyes glossy but her expression steady. Why didn't you leave him? She looked down. Because I had you. Because I thought keeping the family whole was more important than my pride. But I was wrong, and I think you need to know why before you find out the rest. The rest? What could possibly be worse than this? I didn't ask though. I just stared at the note, realizing the betrayal ran deeper than I had imagined, and something inside me told me we hadn't even reached the darkest part yet. The silence between us stretched as I kept my eyes on that note, reading it over and over again. My mind was spinning. The woman knew everything. She knew about my mother. About me. About the life we had built as a family. And still, she chose to be a part of the lie. That realization made something burn inside me, anger, confusion, heartbreak, all tangled together. My mother stood up slowly, as if the weight of sitting had become too much. She walked over to the window and pulled the curtain slightly to the side. Her voice was calm, but I could feel something was about to shift. There's something I never told you, she said. Not because I wanted to lie, but because I didn't know how to protect you from it. I looked at her, not sure I was ready to hear what came next. She wasn't just his affair, she said softly, still looking out the window. She was someone from his past. Someone he never really let go of. And the worst part is, he almost left us for her. The words hit hard. I had spent years thinking our family was stable, that our problems were the kind people got through. But now, it felt like I was standing in a house built on cracks, just waiting to collapse. Why didn't he? I asked, my voice low. She turned to me, her expression unreadable. Because of what I did. The room shifted again. That one sentence rewired the tension in a completely new direction. I sat up straighter. What do you mean? I told him if he left, she said slowly, he wouldn't be walking away clean. I had the emails, the photos, and something else. Something he didn't know I found. What was it? I asked, already sensing the answer would take everything to another level. She hesitated. I found out something about her. Something your father didn't know. And I used it. I felt a chill run down my spine. The truth wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about control, secrets, manipulation. It wasn't just a broken marriage, it was a storm that had been quietly building behind closed doors for years. My mother took a deep breath. He stayed. But not because he loved me. He stayed because he had no choice. I stared at her, speechless. And in that moment, I realized, whatever she had done, whatever she had found out, was going to change everything again. I couldn't take my eyes off her. My mother had always been the quiet strength in the house, the one who kept everything together even when it was falling apart. But now, she stood in front of me like a stranger with secrets that had been buried deeper than I ever thought possible. Her words echoed in my head, he stayed because he had no choice. That wasn't love. That wasn't forgiveness. That was something else. I finally spoke, my voice shaking. What did you find out about her? My mother's lips parted, but before she answered, her phone buzzed on the nightstand. We both jumped slightly. She glanced at it and went pale. Without a word, she picked it up and turned the screen toward me. It was a message. From an unknown number. Just one line, you said you'd keep your mouth shut. My blood ran cold. She quickly locked the phone and sat down beside me again, suddenly looking more tired than I had ever seen her. That's not the first one, she whispered. I've been getting them for months. My mind started racing. Wait, you mean she's still around? She's still threatening you? My mother nodded slowly. When I confronted your father, he swore it ended. But a few months later, the messages started coming. At first, I thought it was him trying to scare me into silence. But then I realized it was her. I could barely breathe. Why would she do that? Why now? My mother hesitated, then opened the drawer again and took out a small notebook. Because of this, she said, handing it to me. I flipped it open. Inside were pages of handwritten notes, dates, places, things overheard. Conversations she had recorded on paper. One name kept coming up over and over again. A name I didn't recognize, Laura Jenkins. Who is she? I asked. My mother looked straight at me. That's not her real name. It's the one she used when she first came into your father's life. I hired someone to look into her. Turns out, she's not who she says she is. I swallowed hard. What do you mean? She's changed names before. She's done this in other cities. Gets involved with married men. Blackmails them. Then disappears. The walls felt like they were closing in. This wasn't just a family issue anymore. It was something darker. More dangerous. And Dad? He has no idea? No, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. And if he finds out? I don't know what he'll do. The stakes had completely changed. This wasn't just about betrayal. It was about manipulation, secrets layered on secrets, and someone out there who still had power over my family. As I sat there, staring at the notebook, one question haunted me more than anything else. What if she wasn't done with us yet? I held the notebook tighter, my heart pounding so loudly I could barely hear my mother's voice anymore. Everything she had just told me was spinning in my mind: my father's affair, the fake identity, the threats. This wasn't just a betrayal. It was a trap we'd been living in without even knowing. That night, neither of us slept. My mother stayed in my room, sitting in the chair near the window, occasionally glancing at her phone as if expecting another message. I stared at the ceiling, trying to make sense of it all. When morning came, we knew we couldn't keep hiding. We had to confront my father. But we didn't expect what came next. He was already in the kitchen when we came downstairs. Calm. Reading the newspaper like nothing was wrong. My mom didn't waste a second. She placed the notebook on the table in front of him. "You need to tell us the truth," she said. He looked at the notebook, then at both of us. His face didn't change. But something in his eyes gave him away. Fear. Not guilt. Not shame. Just fear. "She's back, isn't she?" he asked quietly. My mother nodded. "And she's been sending me messages." He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. "I thought I took care of it." That line changed everything. Took care of it? My heart sank. "What does that mean?" I asked, my voice sharp. He hesitated. "I paid her off. Twice. To leave. To never come back." My mom gasped. "You paid her?" "She threatened everything," he said quickly. "My job, my reputation, this family. I didn't know what else to do." "You could have told me," my mom snapped. "We could have handled it together." But that's when the final blow came. My father slowly stood up and reached into the cabinet above the fridge, pulling out an envelope thicker, newer than the one from before. He tossed it on the table. Inside were fresh photos. Of me. Me. Walking home from campus. At the grocery store. At a cafe with a friend. All taken from a distance. "She's not after me anymore," he said, his voice breaking. "She's coming after you." My knees went weak. "She wants everything," he continued. "And she knows how to get it." That moment felt like the end, but it wasn't. A week later, the police called. They'd arrested a woman who had been using multiple aliases, including Laura Jenkins. She was caught trying to extort another man, just like before. My father gave a statement. My mother handed over the notebook. It seemed like it was over. But one thing stayed with me. In her final message, before she disappeared, she'd written just 5 words. "Your mother knows the truth." And suddenly, I wasn't sure which truth she meant. The message haunted me for days. "Your mother knows the truth." I kept repeating those words in my head, trying to figure out what they meant. I wanted to believe it was just her last attempt to stir doubt, to leave behind one more crack in our already broken family. But deep down, I knew it wasn't random. She wanted me to ask questions. Maybe she even wanted to break us apart completely. But I wasn't going to give her that power. A week after her arrest, life slowly started to settle. My father became unusually quiet. He stayed in the house, avoided calls, and barely made eye contact with anyone. My mother, on the other hand, seemed lighter, as if a burden had finally been lifted. She didn't smile much, but the fear in her eyes had faded. It took me time, but one evening, I sat beside her again, just like she had that night. And I asked, "Is there something else I need to know?" She looked at me carefully, then reached for my hand. "Not everything that woman said was true," she began. But she wasn't wrong either. I stayed quiet, waiting. "When I said I used something against your father to make him stay, it wasn't blackmail." "Not really." "It was the truth. I found out who she was, where she'd been, the other family she hurt. I showed him. I told him if he left me for her, he'd lose everything, not because I'd take it, but because she would." I let out a slow breath. That made sense. It wasn't a threat. It was a warning. She wanted to ruin people, my mother added. But she didn't know one thing: I had already been broken once. I wasn't going to let it happen again. For the first time, I saw her not just as my mother, but as a woman who had survived something deeply painful and still managed to protect me from it. Even when everything was falling apart, she held us together the best way she could. My father eventually agreed to therapy. Not for their marriage, but for himself. They didn't pretend things could go back to how they were, but they didn't fall apart either. Some cracks you learn to live with. And as for me, I learned that families aren't built on perfection. They're built on truth, even when it's messy. I also learned that betrayal doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes it comes from the people we trust most. But healing, real healing, starts when the truth finally comes out. That night when my mother sat beside me, I thought everything changed. And it did. But maybe it needed to. Because in losing the illusion of a perfect family, I found something more honest, something real. So if you've ever felt the sting of infidelity, the weight of silence, or the confusion of not knowing who to believe, just know you're not alone. Sometimes, the truth hurts, but it's the only way to truly begin again. 51.